the end goal of what a typical life of a DevOps engineer looks like, the kind of things that you might be doing at work, what a typical CI/CD would look like, things like that. You can just stick around and just watch and just observe, okay? And by the time you get onto the program somewhere down the line, then it will make a lot more sense to you because you would have had to start all over from the start. Okay, now there are certain assumptions that I'm going to have. We'll talk about that. But before I talk about those assumptions, I just want to quickly let you know that what we will be doing is to simulate a CI/CD process for our tooling app. So a lot of you already have familiarity with the tooling app already. It's just going to be an example of an application that you might be managing working as a DevOps engineer. What I also like to do is to show you a couple of architectures that we use at Barry.io, which it's literally real world. And whatever use case that I share with you, you can actually use that exactly in any interview that you may come across in the future. And when you have the time, you can go ahead and practice these things, the different technologies that we'll be talking about, practice them, get used to them, have the confidence to be able to talk about them at interviews, and really, really understand the reasons why we use some of those tools. Okay, so if you have questions, don't forget, you can feel free to ask me. Now, I'll also show, let me see if I can show you quickly if there's anything like that. No, we don't have that. Okay, maybe not tonight, maybe tomorrow or some other time. I'll show you what our microservices look like so you can see, even though we'll be talking about the tooling app as one application, in reality, you'll be working with multiple applications. But whatever you implement for the tooling app is the same thing that will be used for all the other applications. It doesn't matter whether it's 10, 15, 20, hundreds of microservices. It's the same concept. You just replicate it across the board. Okay. All right. So let's get started. Now, okay. I'm going to be starting from project 25. So for those of you who've been doing all the projects from project 1 all the way to project 20 and all that, just to set some concepts, this is actually started from project 25. So my assumption is that you have knowledge around AWS, you have knowledge around Kubernetes, containerization, and even Helm. Okay, because we'll be using Helm a lot. We'll be using a few of the tools like Customize and all that. Okay, so there's a question. Someone is asking, can someone catch up on the materials already covered? So it depends on your level of expertise. Like I said, if you don't know anything about Kubernetes, AWS, like you're literally completely new, then you might not be able to catch up at all. It would seem all gibberish to you. Okay, so but what it will do for you is to give you an idea how much work you have ahead that you have to do, pretty much. And then you can just relax and enjoy the show. Okay, just like you're watching a Netflix series. Now, I am hoping that in the next 3 weeks, we'll complete all of this. Hopefully, I can get to reduce it to 2 weeks. Okay, so everything I need to cover, all the configuration and implementation, everything from scratch. I'll try and see if we can limit it to 2 weeks, Saturday, Sunday, for 2 weeks. Otherwise, it will probably extend to 3 weeks. Jermaine says, don't know if it's a he or she, but on project 13, is it recommended for me to watch this, or should I do more projects and join the next one? So you're on project 13, so definitely you still have quite a journey to go. So like I said before, you can just enjoy the show, but definitely carry on with your projects, and somewhere down the line, this will make a lot more sense to you. Onyeka is asking if it's a continuation of Masterclass C. So it is, it's actually a bit, ahead of Masterclass C, it depends on what you've been doing in the past few weeks, because Masterclass C has been on break for a bit, and that break was intended for you to do a lot more projects. So if you,
Larry,
yes,
I don't expect you to be answering all these questions for now. Just go ahead and do your lectures.
okay, okay, all right,
Because,
all right.
thank you,
Because
sir.
of that. Yeah. All right. I'll just answer this last one and then we'll just get cracking. Okay. So with Masterclass C, it depends on what project you are on right now. So if you have not been able to catch up as much projects, then obviously this is going to be way ahead. So just to set the context, this is actually started from project 25. Okay. All right.
Okay, sir, please, sir. Not that I'm trying to disrupt you. It's just that the last time we stopped with Masterclass C, you were saying that we're going to start with Kubernetes. So I really want to know exactly the class. What is it for? I know it's like a distraction, but what have to? I've been preparing my
Yes.
mind for the class, so I really want to understand where.
Yes. So I appreciate that. So let me ask, because I sent some videos that you are supposed to have watched. So if you have watched those videos, then you'll be fine, in the sense that building Kubernetes from ground up and watching the Kubernetes videos, I don't know if you had a chance to watch those videos and actually implement them yourself in the last few
Yeah,
weeks.
yes, sir. The videos they're actually for project 21, exactly 21.
Mhm.
And I'm
Yes.
almost running up with that.
Okay, so fair enough. So it's I wouldn't say immediate continuation of Masterclass C. Like I said before, there's still a bit of gap in between, and the only gap in between is just Helm, really. So if you have some knowledge around Helm, then that's fine. If not, we'll do just a tiny little bit of a crash course on it today, so that you can just carry on with it. Okay. So for the sake of time, let's just proceed. So to give you a bit more context, so I have a Kubernetes cluster. So let me just get nodes. It's a 7 worker nodes cluster. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a namespace that we'll be using to work. So kubectl create namespace. Let me see if there's a solo namespace already. Okay, cool. So created that. Now, I also assume that you have some understanding about CI/CD. If not, I'll just quickly talk about that. So CI/CD, which stands for continuous integration, continuous deployment. Actually, this other part of the CD is in two forms. So it could be continuous deployment or continuous delivery. So there's a bit of difference between the two. But the whole purpose of a continuous integration is to put an IT team in a situation where they can always iterate in an agile manner, so that every time there is a new software release, it goes through a pipeline that goes through proper testing, quality gates, making sure that we release quality software into production. Okay. At the end of the day, that is the main goal of DevOps, being able to automate things to the point where we can release software to our customers, not just releasing software, but releasing quality software. And in the bid to doing that, there are tools that you have to put into consideration and configuration to be able to happen. Now, containerization, as you know, allows us to be able to package our applications into images and then run them as containers, rather than how we would normally do it, where we spin up some servers and applications run on servers. Nowadays, things are containerized in containers, which are lightweight servers, as you may think of it. Okay, without really going into details of what containers are. And like I said, the prerequisite is to have your AWS Terraform set up to spin up your Kubernetes cluster. And what we'll just do is just go right into creating certain tools. Now, we're going to be using Jenkins. We're going to be using Artifactory. We're going to be using Set Manager as well. But the most important part of this whole configuration is to get you to understand how to work with Helm to deploy these tools, how to configure them, where to go to get things configured. And then we simulate the initial use case of deploying applications into environment. Then I'll get you to then understand why we cannot continue doing that using Helm. Okay, because yes, Helm has its place that allows us to do the whole deployment, manage the releases and all that. But it becomes a problem when it comes to releasing into multiple environments, and how Customize is able to help us solve that problem is what we'll then do after that. But before we get to all of that, we need to ensure that we set our tools up, we get them configured properly, all the ingresses and all that. So we'll talk about, all those things. So let's get started with Artifactory first. So I'd like to do Artifactory first, and then the reason for Artifactory. So let's quickly go to JFrog. So if you've heard of Artifactory before, it is a tool from a company called JFrog, and it does a lot of things, but our focus is to be able to use it to configure private Docker registry, okay, and also Helm repository, so that rather than pushing your, can you mute if you're not talking? Okay, because I can't really figure out who is not muted. All right, so rather than using Docker Hub, for example, to push your Docker images to a public repository. I mean, even though, yes, you can use private repositories in Docker, but the problem with that is you have to go through the internet, because Docker Hub, as you, I'm sure, have been working with for some time, hub.docker, this is where you can search for images. If I put Jenkins in here, for example, you can see that I can actually do Jenkins, Docker pull Jenkins and all that. But this is public. And even though you can have private repositories configured here, there are security considerations in certain projects that wouldn't allow you to use. Okay, can you please go on mute? Okay, so that we don't distract the class. So that you can not have to go through the internet to download your images, because you have a CI pipeline that would always pull images, push images, but it has to be in a private repository. So to be able to have a private registry for your Docker images, a tool you can use is Artifactory. It does a lot of things, but we'll use it for Docker and Helm. Okay, now there are other options. There's a whole lot of options, to be honest, because if we start naming them now, there's one called Harbor, which you can actually, so you can actually use Harbor as well, but similar to the fact that you're going to have to install Artifactory in your infrastructure, you can do the same thing with Harbor, and there's a few other options like that. The reason why I have chosen JFrog Artifactory is because most companies use that, and I wouldn't want you to focus on technologies that, yes, it does a job, but when it comes to looking for work, you want to be able to speak the language of job description, the expectations of the recruiters. Okay, so now, how do we get Artifactory installed? We have our Kubernetes cluster, assuming that is where we get all our applications configured. So what we're going to do is we go to artifacthub.io. Now, Artifact Hub is a place where we can find Helm charts. What is Helm? For those who have no prerequisite knowledge about Helm, well, you at least know that to deploy applications into Kubernetes, you need YAML files. Okay, we call them manifest files. So for example, if let me show you an example. Okay, so this is an example of a YAML file. So you need a file like this with all the configuration for your deployments, the replicas, the spec for your containers, if you need to mount volumes, all of these. This is a typical example of a YAML file, and you have to run kubectl command, which is going to take this file as a payload to the API server. And if your intention is to deploy a kind of resource called deployment, then it does that. There are a few other kinds of resources you can create in Kubernetes, stateful sets, Ingress, and all that. So we won't go into all those details. That's assuming you already have some knowledge around that. But essentially, this is the traditional way, I would say, to deploy into Kubernetes. But Helm solves a specific problem, which it helps us to template our manifest files like this. So rather than hard code values into your deployment file like this, you can then replace a hard coded value like that with something like this, values.replica, which is going to be a variable that gets replaced at runtime. So it uses a file, a values file concept, where you can then specify the values that you want, so that when it's time to then do the deployment, then you'll be able to, it would internally template your file, and the values will go right into where you want them to be. Okay. All right, so just quick one. I just want to quickly respond to this question. So Mika has sent a message. Let me just quickly read that. Okay, so yeah, so Mika, thanks for joining for the first time. And just for your information, this session is not one for you to actually, we're not going to be going into all the initial topics one at a time. It is, if you're learning DevOps for the very first time, this is not a beginner class. This is an advanced class, just more or less like to give you an idea what it looks like working as a DevOps engineer. So if you want to go through the start and just take baby steps, like many other people on the platform today, you can just reach out afterwards, go to our website, Dari.io, and send an email. You can send to support@Dari.io or something, and then we'll walk you through the process of getting started. And then you can start from the very basics, from the beginning. And if you have any questions, we can treat that outside today's class. Okay? All right. So like I was saying, this is where we can then find Helm chart. So a Helm chart is a packaged application, all right, that rather than creating the deployments, the Ingress, the service, and all those different Kubernetes manifests one at a time, it has actually been packaged for you. You just take it and you deploy it into your Kubernetes cluster, and all the resources that needs to be created will be created for you without really doing much. So let's find Artifactory. Okay, so we found Artifactory here. So I can click on see all results here and just filter by official. Let's see, there isn't any official, but we can find verified. So this is a verified chart, although I don't want us to deploy the OSS version. So the OSS is the open source version. The problem with that is that it doesn't have the features that we're going to be needing, which you need to gain the experience that you require. Okay, so what do we do? Let's see. Let's go back to my notes right here. So if we go to this one. Okay, so I mean, for those who have access to the platform, everything you're seeing here is already there. So the screenshots and all that. So you can go through all of that. Okay, so we can filter by Helm. So let's go there.
Excuse me, Dari, how do I get this that notes?
Yes. So do you already have access to our platform? Like, are you on? Yeah. So that will be on project 25. So if you go to project 25, you'll be able to see everything. Okay. It's just that it's in Git. So before we load the content on the site, we store them in Git initially. I'm just using the Git version. That's why you're seeing like this. All right.
Okay. Is this a private repo, or can I access it? Okay.
No,
okay.
It's a private repo, but you can access the same thing from the website. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we can filter by Helm. Let me just drag this next to it. And then this is the one that we're looking for. So if I click on that, as you can see, there is Artifactory OSS and there is Artifactory. So we don't need the OSS. That's the open source. It has a lot of limitations. But this one, you actually need to pay for license to use it. But the good news is there's a way we can get the license without actually paying. So we'll just quickly start for a free trial. Okay, and then you'll be able to use it for like 30 days. So if it expires and you still want to explore more with Artifactory, you can still do that by creating another one. Okay, so going back to this note, so once we have that, one thing you need to bear in mind when you're working with Artifact Hobby, once you are in the page where they've documented how to install the application, do you mind unmute if you're not talking? All right, thank you. Okay, so bear in mind that there are certain tabs here. So there's install, templates, default values, and all that. So you're going to be needing this quite often, you know. So for example, if you want to install, you just click on that, and then it gives you the exact commands that you need to do the installation. So Helm, repo, add, and of course, the assumption is you already have Helm installed on your laptop to be able to do that. Okay. So the 2 steps. So you add the remote repository first of all, and then you install it. Okay. So in my case, I already have the repository added. So what I would need to do is to do Helm repo update. So just in case you are like me, that you've probably added the repository previously. As you can see, these are all the repositories I have added already. So it's just going to update them for me, so that if I'm to install this version, for example, if I didn't update it and this version does not exist for me, it will fail. I won't be able to install it. But after the update, I'll be able to install it. So if I do Helm repo list, for example, you can see all the different repositories that I've added already. So the one we're working with right now is JFrog. So we should have JFrog here. Let me see. Oh yeah, there we go. You can see this JFrog right there. Okay. So let's see. Now the other thing is default values. So if I click on default values, what you would notice is these are this is the values file to configure Artifactory. Okay. So I mean, this is fantastic because you don't have to write deployments, you don't have to write services, Ingress. And what I would like to do is to actually show you what the Helm chart actually looks like. So before we download these values file, because we're going to go through these values file and try to see some of the different configuration options available, what I would like to do is, let me see, let me just create a folder today. Let me call these live class. Okay, it's just a placeholder for some of the things we'll be doing. So Artifactory, and then let me create for Jenkins as well. Okay, so we're in Artifactory at the moment. So let me go into this folder. Okay, and for those who are joining for the first time, this is completely new to you. You definitely need to start from somewhere. What I would recommend you do is to register with us and start from the start. The very first things you need is Linux knowledge. You need to be able to understand all these commands that I'm using on the terminal. So it's very important for you, otherwise you will be lost. Okay, but the beautiful thing about what this is going to be doing for you is to give you an idea what you will be doing after maybe 6 months of learning and you're ready to start looking for work. Typically, this is what you'll be doing on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so now I'm inside this Artifactory folder. Okay, there's nothing in there, it's empty. So what I would like to do is get this chart and download it. Okay, so I want to download it. So this command is going to install it directly into your Kubernetes, but I don't want to do that first of all. I want to download it first. So what I'll do is I'll do Helm fetch. Okay. So it's going to fetch that. As you can see, it's now downloaded. So that's what it's right there. So if I do ls now, this is the chart. So the chart is a TGZ file, which is it's a, how would I put it? It's a package file that's been compressed. And what we now need to do is to untar it. So I would use the command tar xvf and then specify the file. So the X there means extract. The V there is verbose, which means it's going to show us all the things that it's extracting. And the F is the file, which is the file that I'm passing into it. So as you can see, it has extracted the whole thing. So that's what it's now created, this folder, this Artifactory folder. Okay. So if I do a list on this Artifactory folder, you see all these things in there. So let's go in there. So what you're going to need to then have a look at is in this template folder, you see all the Kubernetes YAML that has been templated. Okay, so it's done all the heavy lifting. Instead of you configuring deployment, stateful sets, whatever, everything has been done for you. You literally don't have to do nothing. Okay, and don't be overwhelmed with the fact that they have a lot of things, because if you were to create these from scratch for yourself, you probably, well, most likely will not have this much. The only reason why it is this much is because this is a public utility that anyone all over the world can use. So they have put into consideration different use cases. For example, there is configuration for NFS PVC here. You may not require NFS. Okay, so if you don't require NFS, obviously you wouldn't need to write this, but they have put that in there. And the good thing is, with this values file, you can actually enable things. So the moment you enable a certain part of the configuration, it will then trigger the use of the respective YAML file that it requires. Okay, so this is the values file right here. So this same values file here is what Artifact Hub is presenting to us here. So if you go to default values, you can see it has default values for Artifactory. This is a YAML file formatted. It's exactly the same thing. You see default values for Artifactory. This is a YAML formatted file. So the values file right here, this one, yeah, this is the same file, is what is here. So the good thing with this Artifact Hub part is you can now do quick exploration. So for example, if I wanted to enable the Ingress, I can come here and type Ingress, okay? So that it literally just tells me immediately the different Ingress configuration that I can have. So if I click on this, for example, it takes me exactly to where it is. As you can see, it is actually disabled by default because enabled flag here is false. If I scroll up a little bit, you can see this is under Ingress. So Ingress colon, and then under the Ingress, you have the enabled sets to false. So if I was to enable this now, I can then come into my values file, search for Ingress colon, and go down. So there's a Ingress here. So the one we're looking for is actually this one. Okay, and we'll set that to enable. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do anything like that here. You know, the best practice is to leave this as it is. As a matter of fact, I'm going to delete this just to show you we don't actually need it. So I'm going to do remove Artifactory star. Let me put flag -rf. Okay. Someone is playing with the baby and not realizing that the baby is also part of the DevOps class today. Okay, so so everything is gone. I've deleted the whole thing. We don't need that. What we can do is to then just install directly. So if we do Helm repo add and then Helm install, it's pretty much just going to install Artifactory first. But if you're doing this for the first time, it's okay, it's fine. It doesn't mean that the first time you deploy it is exactly what you want, because the default values here has Ingress disabled, okay? So if I copy this now and I did that, I know I want this installed in the tooling namespace, so I'm just going to add -n, which is the namespace, and then put tooling, okay? So if I do this, what's going to happen is it's going to install Artifactory. So let's wait for it for a bit. It's taking a bit of time because this is a heavy application, so there's quite a number of things that will get deployed, and we'll explore them shortly. It's actually going to deploy an Nginx proxy. It's going to deploy a backend database. It's going to connect to the database. It's going to run a database migration to create all the schemas. So there's a lot of things it's going to be doing. So if I do Helm ls -n tooling, you can now see that Artifactory has been deployed in the tooling namespace. Okay. Trying to mute someone. So please remember to mute yourself if you're actually not doing anything, not asking a question. Now, for those who are still wondering about Helm, so apart from the fact that we use Helm to deploy and install the application, one of the main use for Helm is release management. So it's able to help us manage our releases. So it's able to store information such as the version of the release, so the app version, the chart version, and then the actual revision of this particular installation. If I run this Helm install command again, it's going to fail right now because I'm not installing it anymore because it is now installed. Okay, so I'm running Helm install. It's going to fail because we already have the installation. You can see error, installation failed, cannot reuse a name that is still in use. So what we will need to do is to run Helm upgrade. Okay, so with Helm upgrade, if there were any changes to the configuration files, it would then upgrade it. So let's run the Helm upgrade. Okay, so although there's an error here, we'll deal with that shortly. But just to let you know, let's do Helm ls -n tooling, because this was not successfully upgraded. It failed, and that's because it's expecting us to set some values in the values file. If we start going through the logs and error messages and all that, it's actually expecting us to set this value. So let me try that. If I did something like that, Git experts /set. Not sure if that's the right flag, but let's see. I'm still going to destroy this installation first. This is just to show you how this works initially. It's taking a bit of time. Let's just give it some time to do its thing. Okay, so while that is ongoing, what I'd like to do is to let's have another terminal on the side. So what we can do is to do kubectl export in tooling namespace. So while that is trying to do an upgrade, let's see what happens. So as you can see, Artifactory is installed. We have 3 pods running. That's the main Artifactory pod. It deployed an Nginx proxy and then a PostgreSQL database. Okay, let's go back. So this has actually completed. So the second one ran successfully because they expected us to set this, and then we did set that. And now it says revision number 2. So this is what I wanted to buttress. So if I now do Helm ls again on the tooling namespace, what you now see is showing us that, let me expand this a bit, the same installation of Artifactory in the tooling namespace, revision is now 2. Okay, so assuming we made some changes in the values file, we now have a second revision. So if we needed to roll back at any point in time, we can then run commands like helm roll back, and then the name of the application we want to roll back. Okay. And then I can select the version. So the revision, let's say to revision 1, and then the namespace. So all we're doing here is just like a crash course for those who have been through the, I think from projects 22, 3 or so, there's a whole lot of talk about Helm. So if you haven't done that, I will highly recommend you go back to that. So these are things that have already been taken care of previously. So it's just a bit of a crash course on it. It's taking a bit of time, most applications will probably not take this long, but Artifactory is definitely a big application. So that's the reason why it takes some time. But while that is going on that side, let me do Helm ls on this other terminal. Okay, it's not returning anything. Okay, so that has returned back to us. So that has returned. So what I want you to notice here is the Helm rollback command says rollback was a success. Happy Helming. So if we now go back and do Helm ls, what you notice is it says revision number 3. So even though it was a rollback to revision 1, it still sees it as a new deployment, but actually it's going to be the configuration of the application when it was on revision number 1. So take note. But what you will also notice, let me see. I think normally you would have said whether it was a rollback or not. But anyway, that is okay. So let's go. Sorry. I can't switch off my phone. Just in case you're wondering, I'm using my phone's internet to power this. So apologies. I'm actually in a very remote area. So apologies for that. Okay, so we have that done. Let's go back to our notes. So what we've done so far is to actually we haven't actually installed it the way I want us to do. So what we're going to do now is to delete the installation that we have. So we can use Helm to do the same. So Helm delete my Artifactory. My Artifact. Because what I want to show you now is how you would have to do it more or less like best practice. And some of the things that yes.
From so far, what we have done is like as Kubernetes is to kubectl is the deployment of nodes. That is what Helm is the Artifactory something.
Did you say kubectl is for the deployment of nodes?
Nodes, that's and deployments, especially when you're talking about rolling back and reversing to the initial version. It's like the same thing that Helm is doing for Artifactory here.
So just to quickly correct a notion, you don't use kubectl to deploy the worker nodes. You know, that would have been powered from Terraform. You would have used Terraform to build your Kubernetes cluster, configure the nodes that you need for your Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so but you would use kubectl to deploy the applications. So you want to deploy an application into a Kubernetes cluster. Like I explained earlier on, you would need YAML files similar to this. Okay, I think I showed some YAML files just now. Okay. Anyway, I did show some YAML files just now, but use kubectl for that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I have a question.
Okay, sorry. Before you proceed on your question, let me just quickly address the question that I don't know who it was that asked. Okay, so kubectl will deploy the application for you using the YAML file. Now with Helm, it does the same thing. Okay, Helm also can be used to deploy applications. Okay, driven from YAML file, except that Helm is a completely different technology. It uses what they call the templating engine, whereby those YAML files can be templated. Okay, I was just going to show you now. The next thing I was going to show now is how you then use the templates to set the values that you want after it has been configured as a Helm chart. So I hope that clarifies the difference between them. Beyond just using Helm to deploy, you can then also use Helm to do things like release management. You can use it to upgrade, you can use it to roll back, you can use it to check the releases that has been released at any point in time, what version is deployed, all those kind of things. You can use Helm to handle that. I hope that clarifies that. So,
yes, thank you.
Okay, so someone else was about to ask a question. I don't know who it was.
I got it. Yeah,
yes.
it's okay. Okay, so I'm not sure if this question is kind of early to ask, but something just struck me. Like when you are configuring your when you are writing your codes for your Terraform,
Yes.
and you want to deploy Helm into your pipeline,
Yes.
that contains your application. Do you deploy it together into your? Do you write the code and you put the Helm chart into your pipeline, into your repo? Excuse me. And do you ever need to like come inside the let me call it this time around, into the nodes or into the cluster to come and configure anything like your application, or do you deploy them together? As in distribute work into your pipeline.
So if I understand you correctly, you're asking if at the time when you are building your Kubernetes cluster, writing your Terraform code, which has maybe a module for Kubernetes, you're then asking if you should also put your Helm chart configuration there so that when Terraform is deploying and creating the cluster, it would also run the Helm part that deploys the applications. That's your question, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And also, do you ever need to go inside the cluster to configure, like I'm talking about in real world scenario this time around, to configure your application like we are doing now? Or is it something that we would have included into the pipeline Helm chart and just deploy everything together and not having to go inside the cluster?
Okay, yeah. So I'll answer both questions now, but just to confirm that I understand the second question you're asking, whether in the real world you're going to have to be coming to terminal like this and make changes to your specific values file configuration and then run commands to update the configuration of applications running already in production.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, good. So the first question to answer that, even though the functionality is there for Terraform to create Kubernetes resources through Helm, as you can see, there is a Helm provider in Terraform. That's why I had to bring up this page. Okay, all you have to do is to set the provider configuration, and then you can give your resource a name, and then you make reference to the repository. So you can see this is the repository and this is the chart. So what you would have done doing Helm repo add to add the repository and all that, you can actually do everything in one go within your Terraform code. Okay, and the example is there. You can literally copy this, paste it, update whatever you want to update, put the repo you need. In the case of Artifactory, you just change all this into Artifactory. But the question is this a best practice? Is this how things should be done? There are times so this should never be your first option. Let me start from there. This should never be your first option. If you have a setup, because it's possible that your team does not have the kind of setup that will make a typical best practice be configured. Okay, so for example, there are tools that you can use to implement what is called GitOps. The way you should be thinking going forward is to ensure that you practice GitOps, making sure that whatever is in your infrastructure is exactly what is in your Git repository. Now, if your team is going in that direction, then this approach is not going to be your option, okay? Because you want to be able to separate infrastructure provisioning from configuration management. Terraform, I keep saying this all the time, that Terraform is actually not intended for configuration management. Helm is a tool that we use to deploy applications into our infrastructure, and it's also a configuration management tool because we can use it to configure our applications. So you don't want to combine configuration management with infrastructure provisioning. Allow Terraform to do its job to provision the infrastructure. Now, in the case where you are out of options, you definitely have to do this, then that's fine. Then you can just put it as part of your pipeline. So, okay, if you're running your pipeline to deploy Terraform and all that, Terraform will still handle this. But you should bear in mind that it has its downsides, because that means anytime you want to update a simple configuration in your infrastructure that has to do with the Helm, you're going to be running Terraform every time. And that poses a level of risk. What if somebody that is not supposed to be running your Terraform runs Terraform, destroy? The fact that you're going back to trigger Terraform is a risk on its own. You could have eliminated that in the first place. Okay, so this shouldn't be your number one option. You should look into other options. Now, these other options is what we're actually going to be doing. We're actually going to be implementing that, the whole GitOps thing, how things should go, the way you should be thinking about doing things like this is where we're going. By the time we finish this series, you will see exactly how this should be done. So we're not going to be putting this here. Now, another example of a situation where you might definitely need to do this is if you need this to be ready as part of infrastructure provisioning. So a typical example is the Ingress controller, because you want to bootstrap the cluster. At the same time, you want an Ingress controller to be available at the time of bootstrapping so that you can have a load balancer that you can be using to manage your ingresses. So that is a typical example of when this might make sense. And you don't put every other Helm-based applications into your Terraform. This will probably be the only thing that you'll be using Helm for within your Terraform code. Okay?
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Cool. Now, the second question was about if you're going to be going into production to manually configure things like that. So what I mentioned about GitOps answers that. If you're practicing GitOps, you will have pipelines that literally handles all those things. So if you make a change to the values file, for example, you're not going to be running Helm update, Helm upgrade, or Helm commands directly on your cluster like that. All you would have to do, if you wanted to change this to true, you just come in here, you change it to true, and you would already have a Git flow strategy. So you create a feature branch, you make your updates, you commit it to Git, and then you push it. Because there is a pipeline, maybe a Jenkins file in your repository, it triggers the pipeline that then deploys it into the relevant environment. So if you have configured your pipeline to deploy only feature branches to dev environment, then it goes to the dev environment, it deploys that change, you can go ahead and test it there. And then when you're happy, you merge it to your maybe develop or master branch, which then triggers a different pipeline that sends it to the relevant environment. Maybe a seed environment, a pre-prod, production, things like that. Okay, so which is, let me see, Git branching strategy. This is an example of what we use at Diary.io that does exactly what I just talked about. Okay, so we'll go into all that later. Right. Cool.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
A thought just came in mind. We always run this containers based on Linux nodes, right? Have you had a chance to, on a production environment, or even if it's in a lab, that's fine, on a Windows node before? And if you do, is there any constraints compared to Linux on Kubernetes?
So you mean running containers on a Windows-based server, right?
Yes.
So Linux, well, I haven't actually used that in production. I've seen people use that. There are certain projects that have used it in some of the projects I've done in the past, but it's not stable, okay? It always has one problem or the other. So many people try to run away from it as much as possible. I know the community, they're doing a lot of work trying to ensure that, especially Microsoft is trying all their best to ensure that they can run containers on Linux and things like that. But if you can stay clear of things like that, definitely do not have to do that. But if you find yourself in a situation where they're already using that in production, they've employed you to manage that, then be aware that there are certain headaches that you will face, and you have to deal with them as they come along. Okay.
Thank you for.
All right. Okay, so let's proceed with our configuration. So what I would then like to show you is what you would want to do. So let's go back into our Artifactory. So what I'm going to do, we have that. Okay, let's delete this. I wonder why this is still here. It should be gone. Let me refresh. So the values file is still there. So I'm going to delete that values file. Okay, so we're back to square one, back to zero. Nothing is there. I think I wanted to show something. Okay, so the other time, yeah, it's very important. So when we created the Artifactory, part of the configuration, it would have created some PVCs to store data. Okay, so this is PVC for the Artifactory volume, and this is for the PostgreSQL that I was created. So I just wanted to confirm that these have been deleted. Otherwise, it will give us problems when we want to install again. Okay, so it's still there. So we have to delete these PVCs. So PVC delete PVC. And bear in mind, Helm does not manage this in most cases. So if you do Helm install Artifactory or Helm upgrade or whatever, and then you want to try to practice again, you did a delete. If you delete it, it would indeed tell you that it's been deleted. Like here, I think, did we run delete? If I do Helm, where is it? Helm ls 2, it should feel that it's no longer there. As you can see, it's already deleted. We've done the delete, but it still has PVCs hanging around. So Helm will not delete these PVCs. Okay, so you have to delete them manually if you wish to delete. So this is a caveat you have to always remember. I've seen in some cases that it actually does delete for some tools. So just in case you see that. So this is basically doing a complete cleanup. Okay, this is release not. Oh, sorry, I was running Helm. I need to use kubectl in this case. Kubectl to delete the PVC. Okay. Okay, so kubectl get PVC. Okay, so everything is gone. So now we can safely reinstall. So to now install, what you would want to do is to have a values file. Okay, so what I would do is for Artifactory, I will just create a file, call it values.yaml. Okay, and then you can start to override. Right? So rather than, let me see. Okay, so please always remember to mute yourself. Okay, all right, so let's see, let's go back. Let me see. One second, I just want to quickly see if there is a part of the configuration that, okay. Right, okay. All right, so let's do it this way. What can happen is When we're doing for Jenkins, I would show you that style, okay? For now, what's going to happen is we're going to deploy it normally the way we've just done. Okay, let's see, we'll deploy, all right. And then we'll create the ingress. Because what I would like to show you is how to ensure that you only use your values file to do all the configuration. But we'll do that with Jenkins. For Artifactory, we'll deploy it normally. We'll deploy it normally, and then we'll create the ingress separately. The reason I want to do that is just to show you how to configure ingress, which is very, very important. Ingress.yaml. Okay, so we'll deploy ingress separately for now. Okay, and then okay, so what we'll do is let's download this. So we'll go to Artifactory. Let's get the default values, and then I can just copy everything. So I've copied everything to clipboard there, and then I will just paste it here. Okay, so it's the same values file we had before, but rather than let me exit this terminal. So we have just one. So rather than do the Helm fetch to download the whole chart, we're not going to download the whole chart. All we're going to do is just have the values.yaml file, and then we can configure this values file as we want. Okay. So let's go back. Let's go back to the notes. And this note is showing just in case you need to install a different version. So how did we get that version? Chart versions. Okay. So if you click on chart versions, where is it? I think it's somewhere down. Okay, there's a button right here. So very important. See all. All right. So if you click on that, you'll see all the different versions. So according to the installation, it was recommended for us to install the latest one. So Helm install, you specify version like that. But if you actually want to install a different version, this is where to see all the different version numbers. So just in case you might want to install a different one, you can see when each of them were released. And it's very important that you always run your Helm installation specifying version. Otherwise, you will inadvertently install a version that you didn't intend. Very, very important thing to remember. Okay, so let's get the installation command. But what I will then do, rather than just install directly like that, I will then say -n tooling, which is the namespace, then -f to specify the values file. So I can copy the path here and then do that. Okay, but one way to do this better will be to save the values file location in an environment variable. So I can call it Artifactory values equals all of that. Okay, so I can then take this one, copy, then go back to this command, remove all these long paths, and just say $Artifactory values. So this way, it just takes the value of this variable. All right. So question is, are we actually making any changes to these values file configuration? Well, for now, we'll just leave everything at default, but we'll keep it there just so you know that anytime you want to do your installation, it is good practice to always specify a values file. Okay, rather than just install it directly and make it use the default values that comes with the chart. The one I showed you earlier on, the default values is embedded in there. But what if we want to make changes to it? Always specify a file path to a values file, which can override whatever the default one is, which is what we're going to be doing. So now let's install this. Okay. So once it's installed, you see some of the things that will get done. I think by default, the service type is a load balancer type. So if I search for service here, yeah, so the service type is load balancer. Ideally, we don't want to do that because every application would then be spinning up a new load balancer. So that's where Ingress comes in. Okay, so we need to configure an Ingress. Okay, that will do that. So what we'll do is the first time we do a release, okay, this will install it by default. And then the future updates is going to have, we're going to change these values to cluster IP and we'll do that. But let's go with our notes and see what is there. So we've done that installation. So let's get the URL to our Artifactory. So let's get the service. So what we'll do is we can do, let's clear the screen. And actually, before I clear the screen, always read the notes. So get the Artifactory URL by running this command. So it's already giving us commands that we need to run. It's basically running kubectl get service, namespace tooling, and then the name of the service. And then it's using this JSON path to actually extract the load balancer IP. But if we don't want to go through these long routes, let me just show you what's going on. Okay, actually, let me just copy it from here. I hope my network is still nice and not giving you issues hearing me.
Yeah, we are managing it. So that
Yeah, it's fine.
sometimes it will break. Like
Oh,
like you wanted to say that Helm is used for a tool and it broke, and I couldn't get that particular statement that you made, but it's okay.
oh, apologies for that. Did that affect everyone else?
No.
No, not from my end.
Okay,
It's
so
okay for my end.
okay, so it's probably your network then. Okay, so if I do kubectl get service now, this is now going to give us the service URL. So if I pick this load balancer and go here, you would see that it would have provisioned it. So maybe this load balancer is not ready yet, so give it a bit of time, or maybe there is some networking we still need to do, but we'll see to that. But essentially now we know this is how we're going to get here, but we're not going to be using load balancer like this because it will be very expensive for us to always create multiple load balancers for every application we deploy.
Hi, Dari.
Yes.
Okay. For you to make use of, I just want to get this right. For you to make use of values, to deploy applications, you don't necessarily need to have the mchat on your repo, right?
No.
Okay. So values can work in isolation of repo, of the mchat repo.
Okay.
Right.
So let's have a look at the command that was used to do the installation. Okay. Here it says Helm install, the name you want to call your installation, and then it's making reference to this repository here, jfrog/artifactory. If you notice, initially we did Helm repo add from the instruction given here, Helm repo add jfrog. Okay, and if I do Helm ls, actually no, Helm repo list, I had run that command jfrog. So this jfrog, I mean, I added the repository rather, and I named it jfrog, okay, because this command here, this jfrog here is naming this repository jfrog. You could name it anything you like. But what it's doing is it's mapping this name to this location. Okay, now in that location, there is a chart there called Artifactory. So this jfrog here is going to resolve into that endpoint. And then in that endpoint, there is a chart there called Artifactory. So you don't actually need to download it locally to work. as long as you've run this Helm repo add command, it has added that location to your terminal, and then it knows where to pick it up from. Okay, so that's the reason why we didn't have to have it locally. Obviously, I need access to the internet to be able to do this. If there was no internet, then it won't be able to go over the internet to pull that. So the reason why we are installing Artifactory is to actually solve that problem so that we don't have to always go to the internet to pull down charts. So charts that we develop in-house for our company will now start living in Artifactory endpoint that we have configured, which can then be within an isolated network. So your Helm commands will be running within your network and it wouldn't be going over the internet, which is what we're going to be doing ultimately. Okay, so JFrog is starting up now. The load balancer is working, but obviously we are going to need to log in. So I need to get the login details. So if I do Helm test, my Artifactory -10 tooling. So this Helm test is going to, okay, what is it called? Let me just copy that. So it's going to return back the same thing that was returned when we installed it initially. So the reason why this is important is sometimes, you've done a lot of other things and the same output that it gave you when you did it at first, you've lost it. You can run Helm test to bring it back. So this is what I wanted. So the default credentials for Artifactory is user admin, password is password. Okay. So user is admin, password is password. For those who have worked on Artifactory in earlier projects, I don't know, maybe project 11 or whatnot, and you had to install Artifactory on an EC2 server, you know that this is a piece of cake. Just taking a chart and just deploying and having everything configured for you without going into the server to do configuration. This makes the life of a DevOps engineer very easy. So this is our JFrog. If we were using load balancer like this, we'll have to then create some DNS records to point the DNS to this load balancer, but we won't be doing that. So to get started, you have to click on this. We have to set a password. Let me just try to set a password. Okay, so I've used dare.com. Oh, password does not match. Okay. Dare.com. So does it match? Does it match? Dare.com. Password fields must be equal. What is it equal? Oh, okay. This is apps.com. Is it better now?
It's actually prompting you to impute 1 digit.
Oh, 1 digit. Okay, thank you. 1. Oh, good. Thanks for that. Okay, so oops, let me copy this in case I don't remember. I hope you guys caught that password. Let me just store it here. I hope this is correct. Okay, so as you can see, it says activate license because now we need to specify the license because it's a paid tool. So let's see how we can get the license. So let's scroll down. Let's go to B. I believe it's been documented. Probably missed. Okay, I'll have to update that. All right, so let's do that. So JFrog Artifactory trial license. Okay, so we need to go to the site. And then we need to fill this out and make sure you select self-hosted because we're trying to host it ourselves. So once you fill this, they will send an email which will contain the keys. So let me see if I can quickly fill this out and generate something. Okay.
Hello?
Yes. Yes, go on. Are you trying to ask a question?
No, I was just trying to be sure I'm still in class because.
Oh, yes, we are. Apologies. I was just filling the form to generate a license. So I think they have now sent the license over. So I'm just going to bring it up. Okay. So this is what the license will look like. Okay. So they will send the JFrog Artifactory license key. Okay. There's another service that they have, which is JFrog X-ray. So that's not the focus for today. X-ray, you can use it to do vulnerability scanning and things like that. Maybe we'll have time to do that sometime later. But for now, our focus is on the actual Artifactory. So let's get that license and put it in there and see if that will work. Okay, good. So that has worked. But what we will do is we'll leave this for now because it wants us to set the base URL because we need to have like actual domain configuration, because don't forget, this is going to be our private repository to keep Helm chart, Docker containers, Docker images, and things like that. So for a company like Diary.io, it will probably be something like maybe Artifactory Devops tools production or nonprod.diary.com or the IO, or if we have a separate domain entirely that we use to manage internal tools, then we'll do that. Okay, so now what we have is a load balancer. So we need to use an Ingress, and then we'll do some DNS configuration to point that Ingress to the load balancer. The good thing is, actually, that leads me to talk about this part. Okay, so we've actually, I believe we've talked about Ingress in the past and routing and all that, but just as a refresher, what's happening is you have an Ingress that serves as a gateway, okay, to accept all the incoming traffic. Okay, so please try. I've been able to mute that person, but always remember to mute yourself, please. Okay, so now we need a gateway into the cluster that will always accept traffic and distribute it to wherever it needs to go. And there are several tools that make this possible. The most popular one in the world of Kubernetes is the Nginx Ingress controller. The Ingress controller serves as our gateway, and you can begin to create what is called an Ingress resource on top of that. Okay. Now, there are Helm charts that there's a Helm chart, rather, not there are. I mean, of course, there are many different people that will create Helm chart, but let's assume you want to deploy an Ingress controller in your cluster. So you can come to Artifact Hub and do Ingress. And by the way, this is taken care of in one of the projects. I don't know, maybe project 22 or 23. So we've dealt with this already. There are different tools. I mean, Istio is one of the tools that you can use to do Ingress. It's a lot more complex than how the Nginx works because it has a lot more features than Nginx. So not a lot of people use that in production, but it's actually gaining a lot of momentum. But you will find out people using Nginx Ingress controller more often. Okay, so you come here, you get the charts, and basically you deploy. It doesn't really require a lot of values updates. You can just take the chart, deploy. So I have done that already. So if I do Helm ls -n Nginx Ingress, should have something there. Okay, it's not there. I don't know what it's called. Let me see. Let's try kubectl. Yeah, kubectl gets namespace. Probably not getting the name of the namespace, right? I have a lot of namespaces here. Okay, it's called Nginx Ingress. I think I have another one, Nginx controller, but let's see. First of all, okay. So we have that, and then let me see if it was deployed with Helm. Okay, good. All right. So yeah, it's been here for a long time. It's been deployed since February. So I do have an Nginx Ingress controller already. I mean, this deployment was done literally without any specific values configuration. So what you can do is you can filter by verified publisher, and there is the Nginx Ingress one here. So this is from Nginx themselves. So to install, same thing, copy this Helm repo, add, next thing, deploy into your cluster. Okay, this is version 0.14.0, and this is okay, it's probably not the same chart. This is a different one, but I'm sure this will work as well. So just in case you want to do this, you can use this. Can't remember the one that I used originally, but anyway, it doesn't. So let me just quickly show you what this is all about. So it deploys an application, which is what you are already familiar with, Nginx. So if I go into that application now, you'll see what it looks like. Okay, so let's pick up this Nginx. And then I do kubectl exec-it. Okay, and then I specify the port, and then I specify the namespace. And this namespace is this. And then, sorry, I need to specify --bash, which is the entry point. So I want to get in with a bash prompt. So I'm inside the container, and what I can do is do a list. You can see this becomes very familiar for you right now. Okay, you now have this nginx.conf file. So if I open up this nginx.conf, you can see all it has is all these Nginx configuration files. Okay. So if I scroll down, let's find, I think I already have an Artifactory deployment somewhere. Let me show you what this will look like. Okay. So let's create a split terminal so we can have something on the side to simulate some of these things. So kubectl get pod minus n diary. So there's actually a namespace called diary that I created. I have some tools running in there. Okay, so I do have Artifactory already running in there and a few other things. And if I do get Ingress, I have Artifactory Ingress deployed. So the YAML that was used to deploy this one, I'll show you an example of what it looks like now, because we're going to deploy our own Ingress. But before we deploy, I just want to quickly show you what's going to happen. Okay, so this is an Ingress resource. Let me see if I can reduce this to make it look a bit better. Aha, okay. I hope you can see this. So you have Artifactory, and then you have host, and then it's pointing to an address, a load balancer. Okay, but just hang in there for now. Don't be too concerned or too worried. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. Or what I want to actually show is what Nginx controller is doing. Anytime we deploy an Ingress, it works with the Ingress controller. The Ingress controller then comes into this Nginx configuration file and does the Nginx configuration for you without you having to manage any Nginx configuration. You know how painful it can be sometimes where you have to do Nginx configuration. You don't really know the syntax for Nginx. I mean, you have to do your site enable, site disable, all those things that you've had experience in the past working with Nginx. You don't have to do any of that. Deploying an Ingress, which is a YAML configuration, will take care of all of this. So as you can see, set namespace, it tells it has an understanding of namespace, Kubernetes namespace, because that's why it's an Nginx Ingress controller. It has been designed to work with Kubernetes. Okay, so the name of the Ingress, it specifies that. The service name. So if we go back into this diagram here, what's happening now is whenever you deploy an Nginx Ingress controller, it spins up a load balancer, just one single load balancer. And that load balancer will then work with your Ingress resource that you create, which will have all the routing information. Based on the routing information, it sends the request to the service that you want it to work with. And the service in turn takes that request and sends it to the port. So the Ingress controller has that configuration. It has the knowledge of what service you want to talk to, what's the port number, what's the routing location, the namespace. It does all of that, whether it's going to work with SSL, TLS, and all that, it has all that information. So you don't have to do anything. The only reason I'm showing you this is so that if there's any problem, you want to do troubleshooting, at least you know where to go. Sometimes you can configure your Ingress and things are not working the way you expect them to work. All you need to do is to come to the Ingress controller's logs. So rather than going into the container like this, we can actually go into, let me exit this one. Okay, so if we go into the logs for this Ingress controller, so kubectl logs, and then -F to follow so that it will keep on streaming the logs. Okay, so all the requests coming into this Kubernetes cluster will go through this Ingress controller. So you'll get to see what's happening, where people are trying to access, so there is actually a GitLab installation in this cluster. And if there's anyone trying to do signing, you can see it's logging it in. So this is basically what it does. Okay, so if you're trying to configure Ingress, it's not working, you go to the browser, things are not working fine, you can come to the logs and try to see if something comes out to you, if anything makes sense. If your traffic is not hitting this log, then that tells you that there's something wrong. It could be a firewall, it could be your network, it could be anything. But the moment you see that there's traffic here and the Ingress controller is logging some information and things are still not working, then at least you know that it's hitting the Ingress controller. So you can then begin to look elsewhere. So this is a very important knowledge to have, especially when you're having issues with configuring Ingress. So let's go ahead and configure the Ingress for Artifactory. So I have an example of an Ingress configuration here, so we can use that. Now, let me take this one, copy it, because this has Ingress configuration with TLS. So we're not going to start with TLS just yet. So let's do it basic without TLS. So we get to understand how it works. So I'll take all the TLS part out, which is the set manager there. And then this is the TLS section. I'll take it out. Okay. And what this, and by the way, this Ingress configuration, you can copy it from the official website, Kubernetes, Ingress, YAML. So this is not something I wrote from my head. Literally, it's already there. I mean, the diagram I'll show you just now is from the official documentation, and it already has an example. You can literally copy and paste, okay? So we have this, and what it's doing is you set the host name that you want to use. Okay, so this is where you set the host name, and when you deploy an Ingress controller, it has a service that gets created. So let's go to that Ingress controller namespace again. Ingress Nginx. So what I'm interested in.
Hi, Dari.
Yes.
In an ideal situation, does it mean that for Ingress, you can have more than one Ingress in your cluster?
Yes.
Then for your cluster, you can only have one Ingress controller, right?
Exactly. Well,
okay.
well, technically, you can have multiple Ingress controller without tampering with each other, because it's possible you might want an Ingress controller to have a specific type of configuration, and then you want to have another Ingress controller with a different type of configuration. But when you are now deploying your Ingress, you tell it which Ingress controller you want it to work with.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's that. So you can have multiple Ingress controllers deployed, but they will always work with one. Ingress will work with one at any point in time. So if you notice what's going on here, I did kubectl get service minus n Ingress Nginx, which is where our Ingress controller has been deployed. And then it has a service, which is a type load balancer. This is the only load balancer you will now start working with, rather than have every of your application configured to provision a load balancer. You don't need that. What you need is one Ingress controller, one load balancer, and then you can have multiple ingresses that works with the Ingress controller that then does all the routing for you, which is a very smart way of doing things, rather than have just, rather than having many load balancers, which number one has a lot of overhead because you're now managing multiple load balancers, and also it's expensive. Okay, so you have that, so now if you notice this annotation, this is where you now specify your Ingress controller. Okay, so that's where you will now see ingress.class Nginx. So this is the Nginx. So the Ingress controller we have is called Nginx. And then if you had multiple, even if it's another Nginx, you could call it maybe Nginx prod, Nginx non-prod, whatever, but in our case, it's called Nginx. Okay. So this way, this Ingress resource knows that it's going to work with this Ingress controller, and then it updates all the Nginx configuration there. Okay, so what we now need to do is to configure a host, the path. Now, this is another important concept that you need to really understand, how to understand the differences between the different path types. So if you come here, you have to, you really have to go through this documentation and read and understand it. So there are different path types. So there's the implementation specific, exact, prefix. Now, in a nutshell, it gives you examples and it tries to help you understand how these things will behave depending on what you have configured. For example, if you notice that when I came here to this site, all I put in the browser was just the load balancer address. So I'm assuming this load balancer address, we now have our host configured properly, maybe Artifactory or whatever, okay? And then I put /. This /, because it's prefix, anything you prefix, it doesn't matter what you put in front of it, it will load the page. For example, the prefix, the part type is prefix, and then we put just /. So that means I can come to this side and put /, and it will work. If I put / and then I put this directly, UI/admins - onboarding page, whatever, it will still work. But imagine if all I did was this. Okay, if I did /, this, and that, and then I put a different part type, exact. And I put this Ingress configuration. What this would do is, if I came to the, where is it? Oh, I'm looking for that load balancer. Oh, no. This is it, okay. Now, if I came here and I did just /, it's not gonna work because the Ingress is expecting that it has to be exactly like this, because the path type is exact. So I highly recommend you go through this page. Let me just share it with you guys. And then at your own leisure, you can just read through this and understand the different, how it works. It tells you, some examples. If you use prefix, /, it would resolve all paths. It basically goes to match everything. If you use exact, /foo is going to match exactly like that. So they've given you all the different scenarios and how all the different ones work. For example, if you use prefix and you have /AAA /BB, is different from /AAA /BBB. Okay, so take note of all that. So let me put in the chat. So that's the okay. So someone is asking if it works with the native application load balancer. No, it works with, I think it works with the classic load balancer, okay, or network load. I think it's the classic load balancer. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's not. It doesn't provision the application load balancer. No. Okay, so what we now need to do is to go into root 53 and configure root 53. And then we need to configure our host. So our time has been fast spent. So once we configure this today and it works, tomorrow we'll carry on and configure, do it for TLS, because with TLS, we have to do a whole lot of conversations around cert manager and all that. Okay, so we're going to be working with, let's work with this svc.io. So there is a hosted zone called svc.io. So let's just use that. If there is no Artifactory already, so we can just create a new record. Okay, so we can call it Artifactory dot masterclass. Let's say masterclass dot service, and even put another thing, maybe dot tooling dot svc. Okay, and then we wanted to work with this load balancer, which is the, so I'm going to create a CNAME, put the value there, okay, and that's it really. So Artifactory, let's copy that. Artifactory.masterclass.tooling.svc.io. So let's create that record. So what you're going to need to do is to go to what's it called, DNS checker, just to ensure that our DNS gets propagated properly. Okay. So I've pasted that domain dot svc.array .io. Okay, search. So everything is propagated correctly. You can see the green ticks there. So we're good to go. So what we now need to do is to get this and then put it right here. Okay, so now it has that. I'm just going to use / and then I'll use prefix. Okay. And the backend service, let's find out. So kubectl get service -n tooling. So it's my Artifactory, because when we deployed the Helm, we used the name my Artifactory. So in your case, it might be something else. So but the service name is my Artifactory and the port is 8082, and that's what this is. So we take this right now, okay, and then we do kubectl apply -f, which is the file ingress, -n tooling in the tooling namespace. This will then create the ingress result. So if I now do kubectl get ingress and then tooling, it has created the Artifactory. So let's try to. So now it's what? So it's picked up the Artifactory. So if we go out of curiosity, let's see if we can get into the Ingress controller and then via nginx.conf. Okay, still trying to open the page. Why is it doing that? Let me get out of here. Okay, it's just acting weird. It's trying to load it. Okay, so let's search for this host. But let me just search for Masterclass. Okay, so you can see it has now updated our Nginx configuration. Server name, this is the server name, and if I scroll down, you see all the different configurations. So namespace is going to tooling, Artifactory, my Artifactory is the service name we configure. So basically, rather than coming into here to configure Nginx, all we're doing is passing a YAML file, and that takes care of Nginx configuration. Okay, so we can now log in, admin, and then if I remember the password, let's see. Good. All right. Yes, got it. So you can see the last part we stopped. Now it picked it up. So now we can put our base URL because we've configured the domain. Okay. So next, we don't need any proxy configuration. Skip. Now at this point, you can now begin to create whatever repository you want to create. So you can create a repository for Docker. You can create for even you can use it to store your Terraform state file. You can use it for a lot of things. So it's actually a repository for things, your NPM. So you can imagine, rather than going to the internet to pull down things, we can lock down our complete infrastructure, the networking and everything, and only people with access within our network can access this URL. So when our pipelines are trying to get Docker images, they are talking to these rather than talk to Docker Hub, which will have to make us to always talk to the internet. As much as possible, you want to limit having to go over the internet to get things done. So this is where we're going to stop today. We've been able to implement Our Artifactory, albeit it doesn't have HTTPS at the moment, there's still a lot more work we need to do. We need to learn about creating repositories, how to configure different types of repositories. There's virtual repository, there's local, there's remote, there's just quite a few things we still need to do with Artifactory. So yeah, so any questions?
Hi, Daria.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
I just, this is not in relation to what we were speaking about. It's more about environment.
Okay.
So I went on an interview and they were asking about the different testing involved. And I just wanted some clarity on it because I was just looking online and I know there's obviously the dev environment and the prod environment. But then I was confused as to, is testing only done on the dev environment, and is it necessary to have a test environment?
Okay, so I think Esther, you must have done project 14 because this was dealt with at project 14.
Yeah.
Very well. And you realize that there we had different test environments for penetration testing, for user acceptance testing, integration testing. You don't even use the dev environment to do testing. Because when we talk about testing is a whole ball game entirely. You can imagine there is a job title for someone as a software tester. Okay, and they go into this environment to actually do testing, automated testing, UI testing, different kinds of testing, different kind of things they're trying to get as far as testing is concerned. So testing is definitely important. It is a huge part of DevOps.
Yeah, I was confused because somebody online, so I know obviously it depends on the company. They configure their CI/CD pipelines differently to each other, so it's not always the same. And somebody online was saying that they have two environments. So they have a dev environment and a prod environment, right? Have a testing environment, and on the dev environment, that's where they did the integration tests and load tests, and then they deployed it onto the prod environment. So I was getting a bit confused. I was just thinking like,
that's the problem with the internet. I mean, anyone can just put anything on the internet. So sometimes you can get confusing information like that, but that is definitely not a good practice. It doesn't make any sense to have just one environment which your developers are going to be developing there, your testers are going to be testing there. I mean, even if it's for no other reason, the fact that they're going to be stepping on each other's toes using that same environment for different things is just not a good idea. Because you can imagine someone developing and then a tester wants to test. While he's testing, a developer is developing, a developer can release from his feature branch, we can break the testing flow. It just makes sense to separate environments and use them for different things, so that when it's time for testing, no one is using that environment for any other thing. It is dedicated only for testing. You may want to test for attacks, because you want to always test your infrastructure to know how is your infrastructure going to react when there is a potential attack. So testers will try to hack into our own system to see how resilient are we to these kinds of attack. Sorry?
That would be done on the test environment.
Exactly, that will be done on the test environment. Another kind of test could be, we want to test our UI. We want to test how our system is going to behave on Chrome browser. How is it going to behave on Firefox, on all these different browsers? Because developers will have to put certain tweaks to ensure that there is compatibility with different browsers, Safari and all that. So you're not going to be doing that while development is ongoing. It has to be separated.
Okay, and then so when it comes to such the unit test that so the the SonarQube and the unit test on Jenkins, that would be prior to the build.
That will be prior. So unit testing is like the very early days type of testing. Okay. So that is just testing the unit of code, the different functions, making sure that they're behaving in the way. If we've calculated for an application to always return plus addition, 2 + 2 should always be 4. A unit test is going to test that is happening, not that you now put 1 + 1 and it's returning 3. So if it's meant to do an addition, the addition must always be addition and not anything else. So that kind of testing, you're actually testing the unit functionality of the application itself, early days, okay, before you build and deploy into a repository like Artifactory. You want to do all that kind of testing in the pipeline.
So would that only be done? So each time it's pushed to another environment, the code, the unit test and the scanning with SonarQube, that wouldn't be done again. It's only done once. Yes.
So it depends on how you configure a pipeline, but yes, you can configure the uptrend pipeline. So it's just a save time, because if it's been unit tested already, and it has passed SonarQube's quality gate, there's no point running that part of the pipeline again. Otherwise, it will just make your pipeline unnecessarily longer. Okay. So if the pipeline to deploy the application into SIT for integration testing, that particular pipeline doesn't need the unit test part to run again, unless you're doing another build again. But if it's already been pushed, you want to deploy the pushed image, that image has gone through that early days testing. You just want to take it, deploy it, and then allow the developers to go, the testers to go ahead and do some further testing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I guess this is the start of a very good journey in terms of what we want to achieve. So by tomorrow we'll continue, next week we'll continue, and probably by the third week we'll be able to wrap this all up and you see the end-to-end flow of everything. So I'll see you again tomorrow. Have a nice night, everyone.